Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and check it out. I've got a package. This one is actually pretty interesting. This comes from Greece. Now, I've never actually gotten anything from Greece before, so shout out to Greece. Very cool. This unassuming little package is actually something very, very interesting that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, and now I finally have one, so we can do it. So I got a lot to say. Basically, we're going to talk about this item, and then ultimately I'll give you my final thoughts and review and all that stuff, but let me introduce it first. So let's just open it up and take a look at it. If I can get into it, this is pretty well packaged here. I don't want to damage it, and you'll see why, because the box is more important than it seems. If I can get in there, okay, that's all set, and oh, there's some tape on it, but let's get the tape off carefully. Okay, I did all right on the tape. Take this off. I'm excited, in case you can't tell. All right, inside we have what appears to be, well, it probably to you just looks kind of standard, right? It just looks kind of like a standard PAL Dreamcast controller. I guess if you're an American like myself, at least the box art looks a little unique, because obviously this isn't what our Dreamcast boxes looked like. But yes, it's a Dreamcast controller, but it's more exciting than it seems. Please don't tune out. So what the deal is here is that I came to a guy named Chris, who again lives in Greece. He has been working on a project called the DreamConn. It's a wireless Dreamcast controller, and it's best to be thought of kind of like, he wanted to take the same concept of Bluetooth technology that exists in PlayStation 4 controllers, Xbox One controllers, although I admit I'm not sure they're actually Bluetooth, but the same like reliable wireless connection basically, and apply that to the Sega Dreamcast. Now, it's not entirely a new concept. He has been doing the DreamConn for a few years. There's been a few different iterations of it. The most noted one, the one that's been out there the longest, the one you'll see the most reviews on, is the DreamConn version 2. This is the DreamConn version 4. And so it's had minor improvements across the board from my understanding. Again, I didn't own a DreamConn version 2. And it's essentially the first wireless Dreamcast controller. There was technically one that existed back in the main run of the Dreamcast. It was by a company called Docs. I actually, believe it or not, never owned this thing. It's considered widely by anybody who I've ever talked to had it as complete crap. It was infrared based and really never worked. I had the PlayStation versions, funny enough, and those were complete shit, so it wouldn't surprise me. This one is supposed to just be amazing, and he's been tinkering a lot with it. So we'll talk a lot about this controller, although I do want to acknowledge a couple elephants in the room. I'm very aware that Retrobit is going to be making Bluetooth wireless Dreamcast controllers. Obviously, those don't exist at the time I make this video. We just know they're coming, so I can't possibly compare them and say if those are any better. I guarantee you those will be cheaper, but they may also lack quality. I'm very iffy on Retrobit products. We'll see, I'm sure I'll review one down the road, but I know that Chris put a hell of a lot of work into these things, and aside from the price, which admittedly is high, I've never heard anybody complain about these things as far as reliability and battery life and all the bells and whistles that are in them. So the first thing I want to note, Chris really wanted to make these things seem like something Sega would have actually sold you back in the day, kind of like the Xbox One Elite controller. He wanted to kind of create that concept for the Dreamcast, an elite controller for people who are like seriously dedicated to the Dreamcast. I am, so I want to thank him for that. Although I have to, full disclosure, he did send this to me for free for review purposes. So I admit I did not have to bite that financial bullet, which was nice. But I'm going to do my best to tell you if I think it is actually worth the money. So let's dive into the actual controller here, shall we? Now, you might be wondering, like, why did he include the box? Why not just send the controller? So my understanding is what Chris did is that he actually bought a surplus of PAL Dreamcast boxed new controllers. That way, every single controller he modifies for the purposes of making it wireless, it was brand new from the get-go. He didn't give you like a used controller he got somewhere that some kid had for 10 years or some shit. No, he actually, got fresh new controllers for that purpose. So, kudos to him for doing that. So I'm going to open it up here, which he's actually resealed it with tape so that you have to kind of break his factory seal. We cut along there, and inside it has been resealed in plastic here. Inside we have a few different items. We've got well, okay, that's all basically in one. We'll keep that box. You have first, the uninteresting part, just a little USB charge cable, although that is a little more exciting than it seems, but we'll get to that at the time. And then we have the controller, which has been nicely wrapped here in bubble wrap. So I'm gonna cut the bubble wrap, and there we go. We have the controller, and the dongle for it is inside of the memory card slot. So we'll take that out and unwrap this, and there we go. So basically, here's the deal with this thing. Obviously, it's a wireless controller, and just looking at it, you know, I'm holding it in my hands. It doesn't feel like any heavier than a normal Dreamcast controller or any lighter, really, but it does feel. Oh, that's so cool. I'm really excited to use this thing. So it comes with these three primary pieces, right? So basically it works a lot like the Wavebird did on the GameCube. So it comes with this dongle. Now the dongle is necessary for the Dreamcast. You put this into whichever controller port you want to use the controller with, and it will automatically sync to this. Unlike the Wavebird, which had like, I think it was like 25 channels, and you'd have to connect the controller with that. Each one is programmed uniquely to work with one controller with one dongle, and you can have, theoretically, if you want to, you can have 4. They won't interfere with each other, is my understanding. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, the dongle is necessary because obviously the Dreamcast itself did not have a way to detect Bluetooth technology, so this is doing that. So there's really nothing else to say about it. The plastic is very similar in color to the actual Dreamcast controller. It's a slightly different color, but it is very nice. It would have been nice to see some sort of logo or something on this, but that would have been a pointless expenditure. So I don't blame them for not doing that, but that's neat. And then it comes with a little USB charging cable. There's a port at the bottom for that purpose where he removed the Dreamcast cable. Instead, you now have this power cable. You connect that to any sort of USB device, whether it's you know, like an outlet for your charger for your phone. You know, you can connect it to a computer if you want to, which we'll talk about in a second. You can also connect it to, you know, a PS3, a PS4, an Xbox 360, an Xbox One, anything with USB ports. You get it. You can use that to charge it. So that's a great way of doing that. Ironically, you can't charge it on the Dreamcast itself unless you've put USB ports on your Dreamcast, which I guess you could have done if you're really into that. So taking a look at the controller, there's just a few cosmetic changes. One is the power button right there, which is this big white button above there. So you just press that, and then this green light, which is the next change after that is the LED that says, hey, it's powered on. There's a second LED over here, which you won't see flicker as often. This is to let you know the battery is running low. So that's very cool, and of course you just hold that to, again, turn it off. Now, while it may look unassuming, there are additional changes inside of it that are very impressive. For example, he actually added 2 virtual VMUs inside this thing. What does that mean? This thing has 2 memory cards built into it. So if I connect this to a Dreamcast right now and I go to that dashboard, it actually will show 2 completely blank virtual memory cards in there. So you have already 400 blocks of storage built into your controller. So I'm sure you're asking, okay, well, if I do that, what happens if I add like a VMU or add a rumble pack? Is it gonna work? So yes, but there's a couple of catches to that, or pieces of information, not really catches, just things you should know. The controller will default to the 2 memory cards being in there. However, it is highly recommended you never hot swap while the controller is on. And what I mean by that is don't turn it on and then put in a VMU. Don't turn it on and then put in a rumble pack. Set it up the way you want it, then turn it on, because it will default to the rumble pack if you do that in mid-use. So for example, if you turn it on and you're playing a game and you're using memory card slot 2 on this thing, and then you decide, hey, I'm gonna put a rumble pack in now because the game said I can do that, it will corrupt the second memory card. Don't do that. So put it in the way you want beforehand so nothing gets corrupted or messed up. So that's to note. Now the memory card though, if you put an actual real VMU in the front, interestingly, what will happen is that it will show you the screen like any normal Dreamcast game. So you know Dreamcast games always have like little animations and stuff that are happening in that front screen. It will do that, but it won't actually use the memory card for storage. So you'll get the imagery, but you get one additional feature, which when I saw this, I was like, really? That's fucking cool. But basically what he did was, if you have a regular memory VMU in there and you hold down the 2 triggers and press start, a little menu will pop up on there and it will tell you how much battery life is on there. There's an animation for the VMU that shows you how much battery life is left in your controller. I think that's really fucking cool. Like, that is straight up some shit that is a genius idea that Sega would have totally done had they ever made wireless controllers for this thing. I mean, color me seriously impressed just by the concept. Now, obviously, I haven't used it yet, and I will. Now, it is worth noting, unlike the version 2 of this controller, the version 4 is compatible with PCs. That's obviously not my thing. I'm not going to game on a PC with this thing, but you can connect this to a PC, presumably through the USB cable here, and also presumably for the purposes of playing through emulators. Version 4 supports that. There is a 5th version of this coming. It's called the DreamConn Plus. Obviously, I don't have that version, so I can't really say how different that is or anything like that. But if you were to buy this, odds are at this point in time, you would be getting the version 5. So keep that in mind. But if he has any version 4s still laying around, you can get those. I gotta say, it feels obviously very quality. I mean, it feels like a Dreamcast controller because it is, but it feels like a new one for reasons previously stated. But as far as his actual like modification work, it's very clean. It seems very clean, and I'm looking forward to checking it out. Battery life wise, what I was told is if you don't have any peripherals in there, meaning you don't put in a VMU, you don't put in a rumble pack, it will play for up to 10 hours on a single charge. If you use one or another accessory, meaning VMU but no rumble pack, or rumble pack but no VMU, you'll get around like 8 hours, something like that. And if you use both, you'll get around 7 hours. The minimum you're gonna get is about 6 hours, is what I was told. So I'm looking forward to testing that myself and making sure that's true. If you're curious, if you decide like, hey, I wanna play on this thing, but I don't like having virtual VMUs. I want to use like a real VMU. I want to save on that for whatever reason. You can do that, but only in slot 2 is my understanding. So keep that in mind. But like I said, the best piece of advice I can give you with this thing going in is make sure you have it set up the way you want before you turn it on. Which goes to the next point, turning it on. What you're going to want to do, this is a little known thing about the Dreamcast. A lot of people say the Dreamcast controller ports are shitty and they break a lot. People pop them and they don't know they're doing it. You should never turn a Dreamcast console on and then change the controller ports mid-use. Meaning, if you want to have a controller plugged in, plug it in and then turn the console on. Do not unplug anything. Don't plug it back in. Only take them in and out when the console's off. So, to use the controller, first you have your Dreamcast that is off and you plug in your dongle. Then you turn on the controller in the configuration you like, then you turn on the console and you should be, in theory, good to go, which I'm going to test out obviously for myself. But that's my basic understanding of how this thing works, and so I'm very excited to check it out. If you want to contact Chris about having one of these made, I'll put his link in the description to his email. Contact him there, and you guys can work it out. But I'm sure a lot of people are asking, like, what does it cost? It costs $179 US plus $15 shipping out of Greece. $15 shipping worldwide. Yes, I know that's pricey, so keep that in mind. But that's why I'm looking forward to doing the rest of the reviews so I can tell you whether or not it's worth basically that price tag. Okay, so I've been using this thing for a while and it's time for final thoughts. So I really just have a few points. First and foremost, the short version is I really like this, and it's actually going to be my primary way to play the Dreamcast now. Like, this is now my primary controller. But that said, it's not flawless. It does have issues, and it has a couple of additional features and things in it that I didn't know that I thought were really cool. And then it has just some quirks you guys should know, just in case you happen to qualify for those quirks. So first and foremost, let's get this out of the way. The biggest issue with this thing is the battery life. Now, it was advertised as between 6 to 10 hours of battery life, depending on how you configure it. I did not hit those numbers. I decided to test this thing to the max, to use an 80s expression. I basically had a full charge and I connected both the jump pack and a VMU, and I played a game, specifically Sonic Adventure, that would basically push them. I mean, Sonic Adventure has a constant state of animations in rotation on the VMU, and of course has use of the vibration feature of the jump pack. So I figured that's a good way to really test this thing. And for about 3 hours, no issues, nothing of any kind. It worked flawlessly. And then after about 3 hours, I noticed something. I was looking down at the VMU screen and it was fading. It went from being dark to a very light to eventually not working at all, which is what happens next. At about 3 hours, I experienced the only desync I had with the controller, meaning I'm sitting there like running as Sonic, and all of a sudden he stops and I can't get the controller to do anything. And then after a moment, just like literally just a moment, it resynced back up and I was able to play again. But I was like, what the hell was that? And I looked down at the controller and the VMU was completely off. So what I think had happened is that the controller got to a certain point in its battery life where it went, okay, I don't have enough power to run the VMU and the jump pack anymore. I got to turn those off. That way you can keep playing the game. But in order to do that, it has to kind of shut off for a second and reboot itself, basically, is what I'm guessing happened. Because it quite simply would not do that anymore. But I was able to continue to play without them for quite some time after that. You have to keep in mind that this thing really was designed to be played without the jump pack and without the VMU. That's why Chris put 2 virtual VMUs in it, that way you can save without needing them. It supports them, but they're not recommended, is basically how that goes down. And it makes sense. Those require a lot of additional power, but it's unfortunate because that's obviously how I want to do it. So if you're gonna get this thing, use common sense with your charging. Treat it kind of like you would an Xbox One or PS4 controller. When you have a break, when you're going to the bathroom or you're gonna order food or whatever you're gonna do, charge it for a minute. Just give it a little bit of power. With that in mind, I at first was very confused by what had happened, so I decided to, turn everything off and turn the controller back on. Just like I told you guys, you should turn the controller on before you turn on the console, and it just started freaking out. Because clearly there was power in the controller, but not enough to run everything in there. So what I decided to do was to charge it just for like a minute, just to see what that would do, and then it worked just fine. And I was able to play again for a few minutes with the VMU and the jump pack before eventually they turned off. So it really was a power issue. And what I'm going to tell you, in most cases, if you're having any sort of issue with this thing, it's just running low on power. So that's my recommendation. Keep your power charging capabilities somewhat nearby. So let's move on to other things. Connectivity, distance, that kind of thing with this. No issues there. The Bluetooth thing worked flawlessly. With that one hiccup, which was explained by the power, it synced flawlessly. There was no lag issues. There was nothing like that. I even went out of my way to check, distances and range. Like anywhere in my room here in the setup worked just fine. And then I went into other rooms, checking out could it work through walls and what the distance was, and it actually worked for quite some time. It actually got further range than the Wii U gamepad. Now granted, it has way less data to send than the Wii U gamepad, but still, the point is, I don't think you're going to run into that issue. I think you'll be totally fine being able to play this thing in any kind of normal setup you might have. If you're able to use an Xbox One controller or something like that in your setup, this will work fine. So as far as other little quirks, I tested this on every Dreamcast model that I have. And even weird ones like things like the Divers 2000 and things with like the GDMU and stuff like that. No issues. I got every single one of them worked just fine, no problem. The only one that I've heard has issues, and I don't own one of these so I can't test it, is an overclocked Dreamcast. You can overclock a Dreamcast, and if you do, apparently this won't work with it. But I don't have that personally, so I can't say for sure, but that's what I was told. The only other thing to say is that it had an additional feature in it that I found very interesting that I didn't know was in there, which is, as I mentioned before, if you hold the 2 triggers and press start, the VMU will prompt you with basically a battery indicator. But that was on the older versions, the V2. The V4 slightly changed that up. So here's what you have to know. If you're playing a game and you want to check your battery life, only do it when you can pause the game, you're in the middle of a cutscene, or the character is in whatever game you're playing is just kind of standing there and it's okay to just let them be idle. Because what will happen is while the Dreamcast and the controller are still talking, they know they're there, the Dreamcast doesn't freak out and say reconnect your controller or anything like that, it no longer will respond to the game. For example, I was playing Sonic Adventure and I have him there and I can press A and he'll jump, right? Well, if I press those 2 buttons and the start button and then I start pressing A, he's not gonna do anything. He's just gonna wait for me. The reason for that is all controls are now focusing on the VMU screen, which gives you 3 choices. 1 is to quit what you're doing and go right back to the game. 2 is the power indicator. As mentioned before, you can check what your battery life is, which is a very nice feature. And 3 is a feature I didn't know existed, which is the ability to jump back to the dashboard of the console, essentially to reset the console. If you think about it, the 360, the PS3, the Xbox One, the PS4, the Switch, the Wii U, they all had that feature, which is you're in the middle of a game, you decide, you know what, I want to go back to the dashboard, you press a couple buttons and you're there. Back in the day, a lot of older game consoles had reset buttons right on the console. The Dreamcast was interesting because it was like one of the first ones to not have that. It just had the power button and it had the eject button. But so a lot of people always complain, like, where's the reset button on there? Funny enough, Sega gave you that. They actually did, but no, they didn't advertise it very well. If you hold down these 4 face buttons, press and plus start, and hold them all at the same time, on any stock controller, the Dreamcast will reset back to the dashboard. Basically what Chris did is he took that same functionality and put it into the VMU so you can just click directly and go right back to the dashboard. Now, to be honest, there isn't much to do with the Dreamcast dashboard other than memory card management without, you know, actually physically changing disks. But it's interesting. You can do that now if you want to. You have that option. So I guess that's kind of it. It doesn't take particularly long to charge, and it worked really well. I never had lag issues or anything other than what I had already mentioned. And overall, I'd say this is a really well-built thing. Is it worth the price tag? Maybe. I leave that to you to decide. But if you want to check it out, I put Chris's information in the description. Feel free to contact him and work that out for yourselves. But overall, it does get a recommendation from me as a quality product. I think it's very, very neat. And I think honestly, it's just fucking awesome that something like this would get built at this point in time. I mean, this is a legit wireless controller. It works so well. It's not like an infrared one that has to be like line of sight or anything. It just works, and I like that. So there you go. And of course, like I said before, it's built out of a brand new controller, so it's very fresh. So that's very nice. So that's about it, I guess. Thank you very much to Chris for hooking me up with this. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later.